This is Dave Perry, and you're watching Retro Gaming Revival live.
Hello, good evening. It is 8 o'clock. It's Wednesday. It's Retro Gaming Revival Live. I'm Triangle Face, your host for this evening, and I'm joined today by horror author and gamer Luke Allen. Hello, Luke.
Hello there, Tim.
Thanks for coming on. I'm very good. How are you?
I am fabulous as always. The world is my oyster. Yeah.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Well, I think we've got a slight horror twist on this evening because not only are you a horror author, we're also slowly approaching Halloween. So as you can see, I've got my, if I get away, some pumpkins in the background, a dungeon setting. We might sort of go off on some horror tangents this evening, but we'll see where the evening takes us. We will have to excuse my coughing as well because I apparently am slowly dying. But we can crack on. We also talk about games. So we'll start with our first topic we love to ask our guests, which is what are your early gaming memories? So what got you into gaming? Where did you start?
Oh, blimey. Well, I'm much like you. I was born in the 80s, so my earliest gaming memories were very pixelated graphics that to my 4-year-old mind would be just like, oh my god, this is so colorful and wonderful. The irony being that my very first console that I ever owned was the original Nintendo Game Boy, which I still have and still works. I got that in 1991 when I was 6 years old. So
they build them well. They don't build them like they used to. It's like my original Game Boy still works fine. You find that, don't you? A lot of like older consoles just work and don't tend to go bang as much. A lot less moving parts though. I think there's a lot less going on, isn't there? Like, obviously things like controllers nowadays have got, because it's all wireless and they've got these extra features which are great, but there's more things that can break. So.
Yeah, just like this, you can't beat the simplicity of just up, down, left, right, A, B, But we also had a NES, which was my older brother's, and then we kind of skipped a generation. Sorry, my cat's being an absolute nightmare at the moment, so I'm trying to keep her from stepping on the keyboard at the moment.
No worries.
Anyway, if anyone wonders, there's Bella. Say hello, Bella. Cool. Hello, cool.
I was waving, but my arm's being destroyed by my
it's just
disappearing arm.
Yeah. So we kind of like skipped we didn't ever have a Super Nintendo, but we did have a Sega Mega Drive. And then we didn't really have anything until my brother and I got a N64, which for my money is still my favorite console.
Oh, nice. Yeah. I think I was pretty much the same. Like I think early stuff would have been like, BBC Micro, and like those sort of level of games, really pixelated. But I don't think I actually got into gaming really until the Mega Drive. So is that I don't know, things like Game Boy as well. Like you said, that's when it kind of really started to pick up, and you can actually really start enjoying it a bit more.
Oh, actually, I just remembered we did have a Commodore 64, which that wasn't like my earliest gaming memories. I remember we found it in the bottom of a cupboard, and we're just like, what is this?
No way.
Oh, we used to play this. We had cassettes. We would play it on cassettes, and we would just be like, "What? You can play games on cassettes? What's this?" Like games.
It's funny to think back, like games on cassette, isn't it? It's weird to think back of like having to rewind and stuff. And that is, we've got Dorbs in the chat. I was going to say hello to you. We've got Commodore. He's a big Commodore 64 fan, so he'd be happy to hear that as well. So yeah, it's there you go. In fact, it's popped up there. For some reason, it's not showing up. No, he has commented something else, but it's not showing up on this. Oh, there we go. There it is. You can see I'm adversed in chat. Normally, I've got someone else do the chat for me. There we go. Yeah, Commodore 64 was fabulous. Hello, just gonna say hello to other people. Hello,
I like the word
Catchphrase.
usage well.
Hello, and then hello, Mike, as well.
Hello.
We're here.
Hello.
We're celebrating. I think like, a lot of people are watching the football, apparently. So we are competing with a Saints game.
Obviously, this is the better thing to be watching on a Wednesday night.
Yes, exactly, indeed. So you what sort of when did you get into like horror stuff? Then do you have any like horror games that got you into like survival horror type stuff? I suppose you didn't get a lot of horror games until the later generations, right? I think horror games really picked up from like the PlayStation 1 onwards. I find.
So, I mean, I can go on a bit of a tangent here in terms of why I love horror in general. It was oddly enough, it was back when the original Jurassic Park came out, and that's it's still a PG rated movie, but when you're 8 years old, seeing it in the cinema, it frightened the life out of me. So it kind of started from there, where I was just like this, it was felt quite unbearably tense when you sat there in the cinema, and there's a raptor screaming at you. And I kind of sat there and thought, I don't know what this feeling is. It turned out it was just tension. But I was like, I don't know what this feeling is, and I'm feeling quite uncomfortable, but I'm quite enjoying it. And it kind of like stemmed from there. Games, on the other hand, I remember a cousin of mine had Ghostbusters 2 for his PC. And there's a level where you go into the sewer, and the further down you get, the more difficult it becomes until you get to the ooze in the pink ooze in the sewer. And I just remember there's a fear meter in the corner, and whoever you were playing as, their face got more and more scared the further down they went, and for whatever reason, that just really frightened me. I was like, what's happening? Why is he being scared? Just take him out of the sewer, But there was an old friend of mine, his name's Stephen, bless him, he isn't with us anymore, but I remember going around his house for the first time, and his family had no filters at all. So the first time I went round there, his sister Jenny, who must be in her 30s by now, she was only 4 years old at the time, and she was sat in front of the TV with a comfort blanket watching Child's Play. and she was having a great time. It just didn't water up a duck's back. But that was when I was introduced to the original Resident Evil, which of course is, dreadfully cheesy by any standards. I mean, Resident Evil generally is. But I just remember, did you ever play the original Resident Evil?
I did not. The original one was one of the only ones I didn't get on with. I found like the start of it was quite hard, and I just died a lot. Yeah. Like comparatively to like 2 and 3 and all the I played most of them. I think there's a few on this, but there's quite a few spin-offs, isn't there? But I played most of the Resident Evils. The one I got on with the least was the first one. For some reason, I just struggled with it. I think perhaps that was because it was the earliest one. I just wasn't, that good at gaming yet to get on with it. I just found I kept on trying to kill a zombie with a knife, and it didn't go very well. I just kept him down.
Have you never read the Zombie Survival Guide? You don't use a knife; you use something sharper.
Well, at the start of that game, when you play as the dude, he just has a knife. So unless there's like the gun that's meant to find, I don't know. And then when it came, I think I really hated the save mechanic of that as well with the ribbons. Because I was so like. I was so sort of like sparing of the ribbon. I didn't want to save too early. I wanted to save the resources. And I would go way too long without saving and then die. But, great, I'm going to replay like several hours of gameplay. And I think I should have saved a bit more often than I did.
Well, what's funny about that is that, that's a game mechanic that's been lost in the ether for so long that when they brought it back in for Alien Isolation, everyone was like going, oh my god, what is this? This is crazy. There's no checkpoints. You have to use a manual save and stuff. I'm like, dude, I've been doing this since Resident Evil. This is water up a duck's back.
Did you ever play Resident Evil 7, where on one of the harder difficulties, I think it's Madhouse, they reintroduced the cassette tapes? So you could only save with cassettes on that difficulty setting. Yeah, it's one of the harder settings. And they reintroduced the tapes. Which is really cool. Although I do think they kind of were a bit too generous, because every time we got to a save point, there's like 3 tapes just on the table, so it's quite easy to get hold of them. But the idea was there. It's still nice to kind of go back to having to save with tapes. But just to backtrack a bit to the films you mentioned, I can remember Jurassic Park, seeing that in the cinema, as a kid. And I think, although I liked films at that time, like I enjoyed watching movies as much as any kid, I suppose, but it was going to see Jurassic Park in the cinema where it's more of a experience. And I think that's where I kind of just had that love of film start, was seeing Jurassic Park in the cinema. I'd be like, you know what, actually, I'm really into this. Yeah.
Yeah, no, exactly the same. Yeah, like, and in fact, Jurassic Park is still in my, well, it's number 2 in my list of favorite films of all time. It's only, I mean, my favorite film is a film called Magnolia, but there's nothing. It couldn't be any further from something like Jurassic Park if it tried. But yeah.
No, nice. And then it's funny you mentioned Child's Play as well. I think that was the one. My parents are fairly liberal, letting us watch films. I don't know how old I would have been when I first started watching like more R-rated stuff. I suppose when it was on like terrestrial TV. I can remember watching Alien at quite a young age, and I was probably too young to watch Alien. I know it was all fine, but Child's Play was the one thing I wasn't allowed to watch. I think it's just because Chucky freaked my mum out, and she's just like, no, you don't want to let my kids watch that. So I only actually watched Child's Play many, many years later as an adult. And I was like, you know what? I've never watched Child's Play. I'm going to go back and watch it. And it was all right. I think I binged like all of them because I think they're coming out with a new one.
I mean, I still find that it's funny because like my favorite horror film of all time is The Exorcist, and it just celebrated 50 years. And Carol Vorderman.
Carol Vorderman's in the house tonight. Yeah. We have all sorts in the thing tonight. Carry on.
No, it's Corridors on Steel Magnolias. No, it's not Steel Magnolias. I regret to say. It's probably most famous for the fact that Tom Cruise plays a horrendous sex guru who does seminars called Seduce and Destroy. Give it a go. It's a very interesting film. Yeah, like when I was younger as well, like this was still at the height of things when like Freddy Krueger was still really popular, and you'd still get, Nightmare on Elm Street 5, 6, and 7 were in the cinema and being heavily advertised, and like that man frightened the life out of me. And yeah,
concept, though, isn't it? Like, the thing that freaked me out about Nightmare on Elm Street when I was a kid when I first watched it is the whole thing was it was in your dreams, isn't it? So if you have a nightmare about Freddy Krueger, then you're in a bit of trouble. I don't think anything else really frightened me that much as a kid when it came to horror stuff, but when it came to Nightmare on Elm Street, it was more like the concept was a bit freaky. But I also found that a lot of those films would go a bit silly after a while, like Child's Play as well. Is it the third or fourth one is just a bit of a daft parody of itself? And like Nightmare on Elm Street as well. If you watch the first one compared to like the fourth one or fifth one, when it starts getting a bit over the top and silly, a lot of these franchises seem to go that way for some reason.
Yeah,
which is what Yeah. Now you mentioned the N64 was your favourite console. What would you say your favourite game was if you had to pick one as your top game?
What, in general or for the N64?
It doesn't have to. No, it doesn't have to be on the N64. You could have a different favourite console to a different favourite game.
Well, my favourite game of all time is Mass Effect 2. I adore that game still to this day. And it was very nearly beaten by Elden Ring. But it took me so long to defeat the final boss that I was like, no. I think I got to the final boss in Elden Ring at hour 95, and I didn't defeat it until hour 106. So, like, by that, it was almost like a battle of attrition there. But yeah, Mass Effect 2 is my favorite game. Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time is still up there. Actually, Stardew Valley is a new entry. I only played that recently. And it was just so zen. It was so chill.
I've not had a chance to play it yet, to be honest. So, but yeah, I was going to say, do you recommend it? You just said it's in your new like top list, so clearly you do.
In terms of favorite horror games, probably the original Resident Evil 2.
Yeah.
Although the remake is terrific. I think like when I played Resident Evil 2, it was that whole thing if you go around a corner, and because it was the fixed camera angles, you could hear something down the corridor, but you weren't entirely sure what it was because you couldn't see it. So and tank controls are so dated now. Tank controls are just dreadful. But I anytime I play the original Resident Evil 2, I just get all these waves of nostalgia. It's great.
Yeah. What did you think of the remake of Resident Evil 2?
No, I really liked it. I thought it was really, really good. Not so much the remake of Resident Evil 3, because there was a lot of stuff that they didn't have.
Mm.
I was kind of like, I was going, because I used to play Resident Evil 3 like it was going out of fashion, and it was when I was playing the remake, it was like, where's the clock tower, where's the graveyard, where's the sewage works, and all this sort of stuff. And yeah, it was disappointing.
I can't say I played 3. I did play 2, and I did really enjoy that. Going back and playing 2, I kind of wish they would do like Dino Crisis as well. I feel like Dino Crisis was overshadowed by Resident Evil quite a bit.
That's the game I was going to do in my.
We won't talk about that too much now. Then we'll come back to that later. But yeah, solid games these are. I think they are kind of overlooked, aren't they, by the other ones?
Yeah.
Yeah, but we'll come back to those. Okay.
Also, I want to say underrated console, I think, or overlooked console is probably the GameCube. I had one of those. And I still love it. I mean, Metroid Prime again Metroid Prime is one of my favorite games of all time. That's definitely in my top 10. And I was late to the GameCube because I had a what was that generation? I had a PS2 instead, and then a friend of mine had the Xbox. So I didn't get a GameCube until quite late in the day when the next generation had come out. And I found one really cheap at a car boot sale. And then some fool was selling some of the games for like only £2 a piece. And I've later found out that they're worth quite a bit of money because they're rare games, things like the Luigi's Mansion and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And so it's up in the loft somewhere. Should break it out sometime.
I never had a GameCube. I had like a friend who had a GameCube. Like we had different consoles. So he had an N64. I had a PS1. He had a GameCube. I would have had something else. And I did eventually get an N64, but I was a bit the same. I didn't get the N64 until it had been out for quite a while.
Yeah.
And I really liked the wrestling games you got on the N64. There's a bunch of WCW ones, and then there was the WrestleMania 2000 and No Mercy. And I think when No Mercy came out, I was like, I'm going to get an N64 so I can play No Mercy. And No Mercy cost more than the N64, I think, when I bought it. So it was actually, the game was more expensive than the console when I picked one up. Because that's how late to the game I was there. But yeah, I was going to say with the Resident Evil games, you mentioned one was your favourite. I think my favourite Resident Evil game is 7. I've not played Village yet. I've been saving Village.
So Village has its moments. Village very much is almost... So 7 is terrifying, absolutely terrifying. And I know there was a weird complaint. Well, not weird. I mean, it's perfectly valid. There was a complaint, that all the bad guys were those weird molded creatures. I thought that was...
It was different, wasn't it? I suppose, like, the way they've done it is it was kind of an axe, and each chapter was like the boss of like Jack, then Marguerite, and then I can't remember the son's name at the moment, but it was like each chapter was kind of following one of those main characters, and it felt like a horror. You're living through a horror movie. It didn't feel like a zombie game. Is the thing, isn't it? It wasn't really a zombie game. It was a horror game. It wasn't really a zombie game. I mean, I was okay with that. I don't think that took anything away from the game. But I do feel like maybe there's a missed opportunity where, like, the molded, because some of the molded were from people, weren't they? Yes, perhaps they could have made it so that some of them were more or less further along in being changed. So maybe you could have someone that still looked human, but with like maybe a bit of mold on their face or something, and looked more like a zombie. Whereas all of them were like one character type, so they all looked the same, didn't they? I think there's a couple which had like different claw hands and that sort of thing, but there was a handful of enemy types. But yeah, they could have expanded on that a bit more. But one of the reasons I haven't played 7 yet, 8, is I enjoyed playing 7 so much in VR, and my first time playing it was just in VR. So I was like, the first time I played 8 experience. I mean, it was great, but the best playthrough of that game was the first one. I played through it multiple times to get the speed run. I did it to unlock the different items, and I played on the harder settings and etc. But the best playthrough was that first one, because I didn't look at any guides or any walkthroughs or anything. I just I'm just going to experience the game how it's intended, and that was genuinely terrifying in some areas. It was quite funny though. One of the bits I found quite frightening when I first played it was when Marguerite's looking for you in the shack, and she's got the lantern, and she's looking at you and stuff. And then when I was trying to do a speed run, I looked at some guys like, "Oh, what's the best route through everywhere?" And you can just ignore that bit. You just run past her. I was like, I spent ages on that bit, hiding behind stuff, worried she's going to catch me, like ducking in and out of things. So it's like, oh yeah, if you just hug the left-hand wall and run, you get through that whole section. I'm like, oh, okay. Takes the fun out of it a little bit doing that. But yeah, I think I've said this on here before, one of the scariest bits for me in that game was actually I got caught off guard on the section where you play as what's the girl's name? His girlfriend, I can't remember her name now. But you play as her for a bit and you're on the boat.
Yes.
So at that point, you've got no items, no weapons, no healing stuff. You're on your own. And I was like, if I encounter a molded, I'm just going to have to do a runner. Like, I don't know what I'm going to do because obviously in that section of the game, you've got no equipment anymore. And I was just walking around the boat trying to figure out what to do. And there's just a bit of the banister was covered in mold. And it just caught the corner of my eye because you're in the VR headset. And I saw a bit of mold in the corner of my eye, and I jumped out of my skin, and my heart rate ran up. And I was like, "Oh, there's actually nothing there. It's just a banister." So the scariest thing in that game was a bit of scenery for me. I just got caught off guard. So the reason I've not played 8 yet is I was like, right, I want to experience that in VR, and I knew they were going to eventually do that, so I didn't get it when it came out. And obviously, the PlayStation VR 2 is quite pricey, so I've got the PS5 now. I was like, I might wait a bit and then eventually bite the bullet and get a PSVR 2, and then I will get Resident Evil 8 and give it a so.
All I will say is that it's a very mixed bag in terms of tone. So there is a section quite close to the beginning which is very reminiscent of your first experience in Resident Evil 4 when you get to the village. There's a scene in a house. I think it's called House Benevencio or something like that. One of the single most terrifying sections of any game I've ever played. And then some of it is in typical Resident Evil fashion, quite silly, which is fine. Like, it's fun still. But you're never bored. I think 7 is better, but you're never bored with 8.
Okay. Yeah, from the bits I've seen of 8, it just looks really freaky. Like the weird baby creature that's like crying and trying to eat you. With a big mouth. I'm like, I don't know what's going on there. I'll find out when I play it. I'll tell you what I did find quite scary as well was I never actually played Resident Evil 4 until recently, and I played the Oculus Quest version. So again, it was in VR. And that's really good, actually. If you've not played that, the VR controls in it are excellent. Like, a lot of VR games can be a bit clunky with like dropping stuff on the floor and like picking things up. But actually, if you let go of your gun, it automatically goes to the holster. And you could be in the general area of your holster and grab it, and you will grab the gun successfully. Whereas I think some VR games are a little bit too, you need a bit too much precision to pick things up. And then if there's a zombie coming at you, you don't want to be like, oh, let me just get my gun. Oh, no, not quite. Oh, there we go. And yeah, you want to be like, boom, shoot, and be quick. Yeah. And there's a few bits in that. Again, you mentioned like not seeing something and hearing around the corner with the old style fixed camera angles. Yeah. The same thing was happening in VR with like you'd hear something behind you. I would then turn around and there's literally like one of the monks like right by you, and then you just have to react and shoot them. And that was quite an adrenaline fueled experience actually playing through that. And because I'd not played it before, I didn't really know it was coming. So I played it for the first time in VR, which was a great experience to play through that. So yes, looking forward to more. And were you much of a Silent Hill guy? We talked quite a lot about Resident Evil. Did you ever play many of the Silent Hill games?
No, and I feel like that's something that I've missed because I've heard such great things about the Silent Hill games. But I will be honest, all I've ever played was a demo of the original. And I thought, oh, this could be something that's quite good. But it was only ever a PlayStation game. And then by the time By the time I owned a PlayStation console, it was PlayStation 2, and by then it was Call of Duty, and I just kind of forgot about a lot of that stuff for a while.
Yeah. I see. Yeah, well, if you ever get the time to look at a back catalogue, I would highly recommend checking out Silent Hill as well. It's a good franchise. Cool. So speaking of horror then, we did want to talk a little bit about your horror books.
Yes.
And your back catalogue. So I don't know what you do. I was going to add having a quick look at some of the books you've got. So here we go. This is where you can got things on there. So you've got quite a few different titles out now, which is great.
And I totally forgot to bring up the next one, which is downstairs in the living room. So Summerside Lake Massacre seems to be the most popular. That is a 1980s set slasher at a fictional summer camp called Camp Summerside. and unlike Como Dobbs, they're free on Kindle Unlimited if you have Kindle Unlimited. If not, they're no more than £1.99. £1.99. I don't know how much if you're American. I don't know how much that is. So Summerside Lake Massacre seems to be the most popular. My first one is Among Other Things, which is a series of short stories.
Which I have got.
Which you have.
On full screen.
You've got the first edition.
Okay. First. Oh, it's going to be disappearing because it's that scary. There you go. Among Other Things, first edition.
Yeah. Your sister-in-law edited that one, actually.
Yes, I hear she's been helping out with some editing and stuff. I think she's very happy to do that. And then wasn't your second one? I then also have here the Office Politics.
Office Politics, yeah. So that started life as that was going to be a short story that went in Among Other Things, and it just got a bit too big. Okay. So
nice. So it ended up being its own a story all on its own.
Yeah, although I felt a bit cheap. Just charging full price for a book that was only 130 pages. So there's 2 short stories added to the back of that.
Oh, okay.
One is about one's about a kid dealing with a bully called Keep Off the Grass, and the other one is called Coin Toss at Acheron Station, which is basically a story about purgatory. Sleepaway camp style ish. The whole thing with Summerside Lake Massacre is that I felt like it was always interesting to you don't know who the killer is or why, so, and there's a lot of red herrings in there. There's a big subplot involving someone else, another killer who is introduced quite right at the beginning, so it's not really a spoiler. And the next book I've got coming out, which comes out on Halloween, is called On the Moor. Now, unfortunately, that's not available for pre-order. It's mainly because I was going to release it in the summer, and then I got married and life got in the way, and I had to delay the release of it. So I cancelled the pre-orders, and then Amazon were like, because you kept doing that, you can't. Kept doing that. I did it once. You're not allowed to put it out for pre-order anymore. So it will be released it will be released on Halloween.
How fitting though to release it on Halloween. That's excellent.
That's a very deliberate choice.
Well, very good one. But speaking of introducing killers, here we have Blunners has joined us. So welcome. He's loading away though. I can't see him. He's there. He's lurking in the background.
He's just doing
he's just turning. So he may or may not chime in with that. So yeah, awesome. Well, great. You've got a new book out on Halloween. And where can people find this? Obviously, I shared the Amazon page. I think I've got a link in the description.
They are all only on Amazon at the moment, mainly because they do make it very easy for you to be able to self-publish. Going forward, I will be intending to release anything going forward on a wider audience. There's a wonderful indie publishing place called Ingram Spark. The only caveat to that is that you got to buy your own barcode numbers, and they ain't cheap, and I can't afford them.
Right.
So by the time the next one comes out, I'll have enough money to have bought a few barcode numbers. So they will be available on Amazon, but they'll be available in other good places as well.
Yeah. Oh, excellent. And that kind of makes me as well a question I was going to ask is what would be your sort of advice for anyone that wants to get into sort of self-publishing books and getting their work out on sites like Amazon? Like, what's the process like, and do you have any tips for anyone looking to do that?
The only thing I will say is never. So in terms of the actual writing process, you just basically got to get the thing written. A lot of the stories that were in Among Other Things, I started writing many, many years ago. One of them, 20 years ago, I wrote it. But it wasn't literally until I started getting, other people to potentially read them and give me feedback that I was kind of like, oh, actually, maybe. And then I had enough for a compilation. So I then started seriously looking into it. But don't be disheartened. The first draft is going to be rubbish. Like I was reading the book I'm currently writing, which will hopefully be released next year. I was reading back some of the chapter that I've been writing today, and I was like, that's not great. But then that's what a second draft is for. So You just got to get it on paper, basically. In terms of everything after getting it written, you do literally have to do everything yourself. You have to design the cover, you have to design the sleeve, you have to make sure it's formatted correctly. That was serious trial and error. The very, very, very first edition of among other things, which I took down very quickly, but not before there were 2 sales, had a spelling mistake on the front cover. It's little things that you miss like that. And there's errors aplenty in my books because even though I now use, there's a few authors that I've met that I now use as beta readers, and your sister-in-law is one of them. And that is an invaluable process. So don't be precious about getting criticism, because what works really well in your head, someone's going to read and go, I don't get it. So you have
it's tricky, isn't it? Like I find the same thing with video editing. If I'm doing anything that's like a comedy, because I used to do quite a few like comedy videos, and the problem is when you've done it and you've seen it over and over again, you've done different takes, re-editing, it's not funny to you anymore. And then when I show someone else, I'm like, I've really, and then I've showed people stuff, they've laughed at it. It's, thank God it's actually funny, because it got to the point where I'd seen it so many times while editing. I was like, this isn't funny anymore. So I suppose for like writing horror, you're probably reading something thinking, this isn't scary now, because you've read it so often, and then you give it to someone else. They're like, oh no, this is really scary. You're like, okay, cool. So it's hard to judge how someone else is going to react to something you've been working on for so long.
Well, there's a guy who's very, and I beta read his stuff. He writes science fiction and fantasy. He doesn't think that he's potentially any good at writing horror, which I think is a shame, because I'd love to read something that he didn't. Have I seen Eden Lake? Yes, twice, and it's an excellent film, and I never want to see it again. It's horrifying, absolutely horrifying. But he's really good. Like he was saying about how visceral some of the stuff I've written is. The irony of that being is, I'm British and a lot of my stuff is set in the UK and we don't have guns. So what's the next thing you reach for is a knife. And of course, knife violence is quite visceral, but I never clicked that is the case. And he even said, like when you're talking about writing style, author, so, like someone like Stephen King is very good at waffling. And you can kind of tell when you're reading a Stephen King book, and Lee Child uses very short staccato sentences. And he said of my stuff, he said basically when the violence happens, it's almost like the book goes into slow motion. I was like, I never thought about that before.
Yeah.
And he never said it as a negative, but it was something that you don't pick these things up.
Yeah.
You have to send it to someone else to read, So don't be precious about your work.
Yeah. I mean, I found the same way. We've not done anything half as good at what you produced, but I did make a comic that got made several years ago, and I found from doing that I did, I forgot to do that. And it was a fun process to do, and it was good to learn it, but I learned a lot more after I'd produced it and given it to people. And one thing I found from that was that I was too quick. Do you know what I mean? It's like, okay, I'd actually need to slow down. Because it was like I was thinking, right, what's the plot? What needs to happen? How do I move the plot along? And then the problem was every panel was like plot progress, and the story just went boom, 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 boom. And I was like, actually, I could put some filler in here and put some extra conversations in. I could have a bit of small talk. I could have a lot more dialogue. I could have slower scenes, and the fights could last a bit longer, because every bit I was showing was progressing the plot on. It just made it quite short then in the end. It's like I could probably stretch the story out a bit. So if I ever went back to doing another comic, I think I would take a lot more away from that. So really true to what you said about just get it on paper, get something done.
Yeah.
You learn from it. Then the next thing you make is better. And then the next thing you make is better. And then you might look back on something you did years ago and think, oh, I'm not as proud of that as I am of something you've just done. But it's part of the process to get there. Sometimes done is better than perfect, and you actually get something out and grow from it. And I just love the feeling of having something physical in your hands. You're like, I made this. Yes. Like, actually, I think one of my favorite feelings was just opening that box of the delivery and seeing my comics in a box and getting them out. That's a great feeling, isn't it? When you actually get things out like that.
It's interesting, actually, because I have planned. I have a book planned, which will be a zombie book, but it's more kind of. I know that one's probably going to be big because the scope of it's going to be big. It will be a worldwide scope. The irony being that I'm re-listening to the audiobook of World War Z, and I'm just sitting there,
Nice.
damn it, he's done it as well. Like I haven't read it for a long time, and I was like, damn it, that's what I was going to do. Damn it, that's what I was going to do. But I don't think I'm ready to write a book that big until I've tried writing the one that I'm currently writing, which is similar in terms of themes and but it's a microcosm of what I'm hoping to do in the zombie novel. It focuses mostly on a supernatural threat on this one town, a fictional town set in the Pacific Northwest, that becomes under siege from a supernatural force. And so each one is a learning experience. So it was Summerside Lake Massacre. I was like, okay, well, that was my first novel. So I was going to move on to the one that I'm currently writing. I was going to move on to that one next, but then my wife said, I think you need to do something that's maybe shorter and faster and has a smaller group of characters, so you can just get the more character-based stuff done if you're going to try something bigger. And had I realized how much of a pain in the ass the next book is going to, the one that's coming out on Halloween, that's been a ball ache to write, but hopefully it works. So this is more of a straightforward chase thriller, this next one.
Yeah. So I did actually start, I had an idea, this was years ago now. It was a bit of a failed experiment, really. But I had this idea to like write a series of short stories about zombies and stuff. But I was thinking of just like getting lots of people to contribute. So lots of different people wrote a short story and put it all in together. And my idea was like, right, I'm going to establish the rules, because, you know, like if you have anything like zombies, there's like, how long does it take to turn? How does it get transmitted? And just a few sort of baseline rules. So I say to them, right, as long as your story follows true to these rules of how it all works in this fictional sense, write whatever story you want to write, but then they'll all exist within the same universe because they're all conforming to the same rules of how the zombies work, if you know what I mean. And I wrote a story, a couple of my friends did some, and then that was it. I had 3 stories. I was like, that's not enough for a book. So it didn't really go any further. But yeah, I thought it was a good idea to give it a crack, but I moved on to other things shortly afterwards because I just didn't get the uptake on it. But yeah, do you do anything like that? Do you think about what the rules are, if you know what I mean, so that you've got a bit of foreshadowing, you know, like, okay, I have to work within these parameters of, because obviously what I mean is like when you have, I find this whenever I'm watching a film or reading a book or playing a game, there's things that you deny disbelief, right? So you say, okay, I'm accepting this happens, but everything else has to still make sense.
It has to make sense within the logic of the piece that you're writing.
Yes,
like
exactly.
As ludicrous as something like Fast and Furious has become, it makes sense within the logic of that particular series or that film. No, I 100% agree. And as soon as that logic is kind of like broken or something happens, or you're just like, hang on, we haven't established that, you know. Like
you need to have some ground rules. Yeah. So when you introduce like a supernatural element to a story, is that part of your thought process to think, oh, how does this actually apply to the world?
To an extent. So the one I'm writing at the moment, oddly enough, so a bit of backstory. This one stemmed from a nightmare I had shortly after watching The World's End, the comedy film, and I could do a book of short stories like Creepshow or Twilight Zone. Ooh, I like that. Although saying that, bit of a segue, I have got a short story written which I'm hoping to put forward. There's a guy who did a very kind review of Summerside Lake Massacre, and he's come together with an independent publisher to put a collection of trashy short stories together. So I've written a short story for that, and hopefully that'll be included. Anyway, segue. So the book I'm writing at the moment, the dream was that a couple were running away from a burning beach house to another beach house that was down, further down the beach. And as they arrive, the lady in the couple starts screaming, saying, no, I thought we got rid of them. And then the guy looks out the window and sees similar creatures to the robots in The World's End, but they're in various states of disarray, and their eyes are glowing like this horrible, noxious green that's almost like smoke coming out of their eyes. But there was like a profound sense of dread, and I sat there and thought that would be a really good image to have in a story. So it then kind of became, like, well, why are there people with glowing eyes? Why is there a beach house? Why are these people in that beach house? And like the title came quite easily. The book is called The Eyeless because they don't look like they've got eyes. But like as to the why, but then what's interesting is that it becomes like I had an idea for something else that was a bit more apocalyptic. That's all I will say because I don't want to give too many spoilers for the book I'm writing at the moment. And I kind of sat there and thought, oh, okay, well, could that be like the crux of the story for this? So as soon as that came into place, I then suddenly had a MacGuffin, and then I do plan to a certain extent. I do write an outline, not a crazy detailed one, because that doesn't necessarily leave crazy amounts of room for maneuvering. But in terms of, once you get the outline done, that's almost like there's the logic of the piece. And I almost have to kind of like realize that, well, not realize, you kind of get to a point where you're like, okay, well, that's how the plot's going to work out. That's how the logic is going to work. And then being conscious of whether that's going to break that logic. And the fortunate thing about my wife is she edits my books now. And she asks me questions about the logic of what's going on. And then as soon as she starts not getting something or something breaks that logic, she asks me, is there a reason for that? Or is that going to get explained later? And if I say no, she's like, well, get rid of it then, because it doesn't make any sense.
It's all part of the process, isn't it? Yeah. And I think, like you say, if you're coming up with some sort of overarching story, it allows you to have some foreshadowing and things like that in there. You kind of got an idea of where it's going. So, I've always kind of found the creative process for things like that really interesting and good to see like what other people, how they approach it and things like that. I think I almost like project manage stuff too much. I should probably do things a little bit more loosely, so I can, have that creative space. Yes,
that stems from being a manager, Tim.
Yes, probably. Cool. Yeah, no, that's great. Thanks for sharing all of that with us. I think we'll segue nicely onto it. It's going to be a bit of a change in tone for this intro. We're going to move on to the Desert Island Games Room, he says as he has the video ready. Nice, peaceful, relaxing music there to go in with our horror theme for the show. So yes, we've got the Desert Island Games Room. For those of you who've not seen this segment yet, I'm building a fictional games room. I think what games would be in there. It's got a handful of games so far. I'll just cover them off at the moment. We have added Sonic 3. We've got Outrun Coast to Coast, and we've got Sonic Adventure 2. So those are the games that are already in this games room, and you're going to be entering and bringing one with you. So what game would you like to leave in the Desert Island games room?
Stardew Valley. Just because it's a game that never ends. It's very relaxing. It sounds really dumb by calling it like an asset management game, but you're basically just building a farm. Something like, it feels like Spiritfarer. Have you ever played Spiritfarer? One of my wife's favorite games, that one. And yeah, I think it's so. I mean, it's a very relaxing game. It would be obvious to put something in like some of my favorite games like Elden Ring or something like that. But there's that's a game that has a beginning and an end. Beginning, middle, and end.
Yeah.
You can basically if you're going Desert Island forever.
Yeah, exactly. No, you have understood the assignment perfectly. So yeah. Stardew Valley, there you go. I was thinking that was going to be a lot of people's thinking, like what's something you can keep playing forever and come back to it. So yeah, no, good choice. I will add that to the list and we'll see where that goes. I think the first one we've got that Sonic 3 that Tess wanted us to add in, and I just hope for her sake one day somebody puts in Sonic and Knuckles, because she wanted Sonic 3 and Sonic and Knuckles. I was like, do you know what? That is one of my favorite Mega Drive games of all time. Is Sonic 3 plugged into Sonic and Knuckles? Fantastic. But it's like, but based on the rules I've established, you can have one of them. So someone else is going to have to add the add Knuckles bit. So we'll see if anyone decides to do that. Cool. Right. Thank you very much for being there. Now we teased this earlier, so we're going to come back to it though, and that is the Wallace remasters.
Yeah.
So if you can have 3 games that you can remake or remaster, what games are you going to be looking at?
Well, Dino Crisis is one. I think if that gets the recent Resident Evil remake treatment, I think it could just be great. Another 2. Good grief. Probably something like Ocarina of Time, and I don't mean like I'm not talking like a proper Resident Evil 2 thing, but like the game ultimately stays the same, but it's like built on Unreal or something like that. And I'm trying to think of old games that I loved, and then no, Half-Life. I know they did Black Mesa.
Oh yeah,
but the original Half-Life, I would absolutely because Black Mesa took a while, didn't it? It was kind of like an ongoing thing.
You can play. I'm right in thinking. I don't know if it's just mods, or they've actually officially released a VR version of Half-Life, haven't they now? Okay. Is there a VR Half-Life or Half-Life 2? But I don't know if there's an official release of it, or if it's just people that have been modding it and managed to get a VR version.
Okay, well, I'll take Half-Life out only because Black Mesa's around. No, blimey, what other games? It's difficult because so many of them are either being re-released with, fully remade, or because I was going to say Turok 2, but even Night Dive Studios did a slight HD remaster of that one.
Oh, what? I'm sorry.
I love
Turok. So what game? Sorry, Turok
2.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't know. I might have to come back to you on that one. Come back to you on the socials and pick a third one.
Okay. Well, yeah.
So
Stage
like games I loved when I was younger, so things like Spyro and stuff, they've all been remastered.
Yeah,
Crash Bandicoot's been remastered.
I was just thinking the same. Actually, we're quite spoilt. Really, we're here saying, "Oh, if we could remaster any game, what would it be?" And there's quite a few that have already been done. We are getting them. So then, we are getting these remasters done for us, which is great. Okay, different question for you then. What is your favourite remaster that has come out already? What do you think the best remaster has been?
Probably Resident Evil 2. Wait, remaster or remake?
Joe, I'm always a bit dubious about what the difference is, to be honest. When people say remaster, I'm like, yeah, it depends. Is it just like an HD re-release or is it a full game? When I think about it, I'm looking at things like Resident Evil 2, personally. So actually remaking the game. So yeah, a remake, I'd call it.
I would say it's either Resident Evil 2 or this year's Dead Space remake. Phenomenal, that remake, absolutely brilliant. And I polished that off in a weekend, and I was saying to my brother, I was like, "You've got to play this," because he'd never played the original. I've been a big fan of the Dead Space series for quite some time. Even the third one, which everyone hates, and I think, yeah, it's fine. It's not the same as the other two, but it's fine. But yeah, that remake was kind of like a proper in-betweeny of doing an HD remaster and doing a from the ground up remake like Resident Evil. So it's basically the same game, but it's built on Frostbite, so it looks great, and is they've done it in such a way that you can keep going to multiple places across the ship, whereas in the original version, have you played the original?
Yeah, but I played the first one. I don't think I played 2 or 3. I think I just played 1.
So do you remember in the first one, like the level would each level ended with you going back to the tram, and then it would take you to another part of the ship, and then you would do that level, and then in the remake, the tram is just something that you can keep using. As soon as you've unlocked an area, you can keep going back to it. So it's almost like they've now introduced things like just little side quests that give you either additional scares or additional resources, that sort of stuff, and the lighting engine and everything, because it's Frostbite. There's so much more atmosphere. It's just great. It's really, really great. Oh, hang on. Does Luke like the Uncharted games? Ooh.
Yeah, there we go. And we've got 2. So Dorbs is not a fan of Final Fantasy VII. It comes up a lot. Me and Ollie, it's one of our favourite games. So there's a bit of a clash over there. We say it's one of the best games ever. He thinks it's garbage. Where do you stand on Uncharted and then on Final Fantasy VII?
Okay, so Final Fantasy VII, I'm not a fan unless it's the original Pokemon. I'm not a fan of turn-based combat, and I've never really liked Final Fantasy games like JRPGs. I've never been a massive fan of. Leave Final Fantasy alone.
I think the thing is that's fair enough because there is a lot of polarization. They keep saying Storms like he says this, he hates it and stuff. It's like you don't like turn-based games. Like I don't think he'd like Pokemon. I think it's just that the random encounters and things. The thing is though, I've always liked going into your items and your magic and finding cool combinations. Like I think 7's probably one of the best ones for that. So you go, okay, I'm going to combine, added effect with drain and things like that, so you can like cast different things at the same time and come up with different combos. And especially near the end of the game, you can have things like a quadrat where you can do something 4 times. And there's a really good combo that I used to do, which was if you do mime and quadrat, you mime your previous action. And as long as nobody else does anything, if you do their limit break and then nobody does anything, not even defend, and then you do mime, you'll then do your limit break 4 times for free. So I used to love discovering things like that. And even in the last time I played through it, I didn't realize that the summon materia has like status effects. And when you pick up Odin's status is actually death. And you can use it, link Odin with added effect. And when you hit people, it casts death. So I quite enjoy building those combos up and things like that. But if you can't be bothered with any of that, and you're like, oh, that's really boring, it's not for you because you're just going to get, what the hell is this?
I really like doing that stuff kind of in the heat of the moment. So one game that I'm playing at the moment is Life of P, which came out on Game Pass.
Yeah, I've been playing that,
I really like it. I mean, at the moment, like I don't think it's been a great year for games. Like not in terms of there's been loads of bad ones, but there's been a lot of ones that have been entertaining but not genuinely great. And Life of P for me at the moment is up there with Hi-Fi Rush in terms of one of my favorite games of the year. But it was like you've got your Legion arm, which is like your robot arm and stuff like that. So it's being able to, like include that in with combos that you're doing and, adding your fire. But I like doing that sort of stuff when you're in the heat of battle. So it just adds that element of excitement.
Yeah.
Going back to Como Dobbs on Uncharted, I'm not the biggest fan of the Uncharted games. I think this is my hot take. My hot take is that the rebooted Tomb Raider trilogy is better than the Uncharted games.
Okay. Yeah. There you go. I can't say I played a huge amount of Tomb Raider. I played Uncharted. I quite like that because Dobbs kept recommending it. So I'll give it a go. And I did enjoy Uncharted. And I had like the Nathan Drake trilogy. So I was going to go straight from 1 into 2. It's like, I feel like I need a break from Uncharted, play something else, then come back to it. Because I like kind of mixing up the play styles of different games. But yeah, it's weird because I really like 2 of my favorite genres of games, like beat 'em ups and turn-based Japanese RPGs, which are very different. Because like if you play like Tekken, it's very much intense, like reaction and things like that. Whereas like a turn-based battle system is completely opposite. It's planning ahead and thinking and taking the turns, isn't it? So very different play styles, but yeah, like them for different reasons. Yeah, I think you've upset Dorbs there. But it's okay, Dorbs. He doesn't like Final Fantasy VII. So he doesn't like Uncharted, but he also doesn't like Final Fantasy VII. So I think the universe is balanced.
But I also like these kinds of conversations because, and not to be argumentative, I think like healthy debate and understanding why people like something that you don't necessarily like, or I'm not saying I hate the Uncharted games. I just think that they're okay. I think it's a lot of when you sit there and think about the sheer wealth of bad guys Nathan Drake is killing, you're just kind of like, come on, man. whereas a similar thing happens in something like The Last of Us, but I much prefer The Last of Us for some reason.
I'll be honest, that's my unpopular opinion, is I didn't really enjoy The Last of Us, to be honest. But the thing is, like, there's a lot of this nostalgia for it, and I think it's very, very popular at the time. But the problem is, all I ever heard about it was, oh, it's the best game ever. It's like,
I got that.
It was absolutely amazing, blah, blah, blah. And I didn't play it until they started bringing out the remasters and stuff. And I played the first one. I mean, it wasn't bad. I enjoyed it. But I was like, is this like a complete game changer? Like, best game ever? And I think it was overhyped for me is the problem. Because everyone I spoke to about it absolutely loved it. And I thought it was all right. So, unpopular opinion, though, because I know a lot of people love that game. And I wouldn't bash it.
Getting distracted a little bit by my cat. Who wants to see the cat? Come here, Bella.
Indeed, we are. It has become a bit of a running joke now. The love-hate of Final Fantasy. Hello. Right, we've got one other segment we could just tack on at the end because we've got a few minutes to spare. and let's look at the Liam's love to hate. So, is there a game that you know isn't very good, but you keep playing it anyway, and you keep coming back to that game that you love to hate?
Dead Island.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Well, I quite like Dead Island. Why'd you hate it? Or
well,
why'd you not hate
I
it?
hate it. I think I can understand why people think it's okay because it had that awesome cinematic trailer about that reverse thing with the
that was cool.
And then the game kind of came out and it got middling reviews, but also at the same time I was playing it and I was just like, this is just my kind of bag, really. Like, I know the controls are clunky, I know the animation's not great, and Techland have gone on to do better things with Dying Light, but I still go back to Dead Island from time to time. Not so much Dead Island Riptide, that wasn't very good. And what's the cat's name? Looks like a Trevor or Simon. This is Bella. We didn't name her. We got her from Cats Protection. So she's a little bit wobbly. You can't really see her eyes. She literally looks like this. She's a bit bug-eyed, but she's a little rascal. I'm surprised she hasn't made more noise, to be fair. But Dead Island or crikey, what's the other one? Fallout 76.
So I've not played that one. I did play Dead Island, and I kind of agree with you that the problem I found with Dead Island is I was massively hyped for that game because the trailer looked awesome, and the fact that it was like multiplayer, right? You could play with multiple people,
with other people.
And I had a group of friends we played online with quite a lot, and I was really looking forward to like doing that as a multiplayer. And things didn't line up. We didn't really get around to playing online much. It didn't really happen. But I think the much better thing for that was Left 4 Dead. I think Left 4 Dead 2 was fantastic. And then what is it? The one that came out fairly recently, was it Left 4 Dead 4?
Oh,
I want to say
Blood.
Oh yeah, Back 4 Blood, because there wasn't was there a 3?
No,
Back 4 Blood. This is very confusing naming conventions there, because I thought it was the fourth one, but there isn't a third. Anyway, but yeah, that again was a bit of a letdown. I was like, this isn't what I was hoping for.
The same pizzazz.
No, and sometimes you just get these games which are just like lightning in a bottle, and they have all the right elements and they're brilliant. And then there's like another one, and it's just not the same. It's like I found like Time Splitters. One of my favorite games is Time Splitters 2.
Yeah.
And I couldn't wait for Time Splitters 3 to come out. And when it did, I was like, oh, this isn't as good as 2. So this happens sometimes, doesn't it? It's like Halo. Absolutely love the Halo games, but I think it peaked at Halo Reach. I played Halo Reach to death. I played absolutely loads. Absolutely loved Reach. And since then, like, I've not played Halo Infinite yet. I've had it installed on my Xbox for a while. It's just sat there. I've not started it yet. Like, I want to play it. I've stuck with the franchise. I've played every other single one. Infinite's the only one I haven't played. But it's hard to like keep going when this feels like it's gone downhill. A bit like the Assassin's Creed games. I'm intrigued by Mirage because it looks like it's a bit of a callback to the older ones.
Yeah.
I kind of stuck with the franchise for such a long time that it got to a point where it was like, I'm just going to move on to something else now because I've just been playing Assassin's Creed games for years and I want to try something else.
I think for me, so I came into Assassin's Creed quite late, and I think the first one I played was Black Flag, which was fine. I didn't think it was great, but I remember playing Syndicate and thinking, "Oh, this is quite fun." And then I think it was when it got to Origins. I mean, I really like Origins. I think Origins is a personal favorite of mine. But
I'm surprised you don't like Black Flag. I think Black Flag's up there as one of my favorites.
No,
I think Black Flag's really good.
It just took me too long. I mean, it got to a point where I was doing a. The funny thing is that the boating stuff is the stuff I like the least, especially in the most recent Assassin's Creed games.
It's weird. I didn't enjoy the boat section in 3. I thought the boats in 3 weren't very good. And when people were saying, "Oh, it's all about the boats in Black Flag," I was like, "I'm not interested then." And a couple of my mates were just like, "No, it's much better in this. You've got to try Black Flag." Yeah. And I did. I was like, "No, they're right. This is great. I really enjoyed the boat bits and that." But I don't know what it was about 3. I think it's just the controls weren't very good, and I struggled to navigate the boats. And then 4 is just a lot better. But yeah, it's lots of, we did have another question here from Dork about have you played Cyberpunk 2077?
Oh yes, a few times. I haven't played Phantom Liberty. I feel like I was fortunate enough to have a pretty good gaming experience with Cyberpunk 2077. I had a Xbox One X, so I didn't get like the horrible, like the lack of pop in on textures and stuff like that. I mean, there were bugs, but I think people seem to forget that there was loads of bugs in The Witcher 3 when that first came out. There were some hilarious ones when I was playing it for the first time, but that didn't stop it from being a really good game. So yeah, Cyberpunk, I'm a massive fan of, huge fan of, but I haven't played it since Phantom Liberty came out.
I have yet to play it at all, so it's not something I've touched yet. Just never got around to it. So the thing is, things come out so fast now. I just don't have time to play everything.
Yeah,
there's lots of things that look good. I've got such a back catalogue. You just have to pick and choose what you're going to get to. I think I will have to make room for Spider-Man 2. I think I'm going to have to play Spider-Man 2. Spider-Man was one of my favourite games of the PS4. And yeah, it's just got to be done. I tend to avoid buying games on launch day because I've got so much content from my Game Pass and PlayStation Plus and all that sort of stuff. There's so many games I've got access to that I've not played. I feel bad spending, 60 quid on a launch day one game, but might change. I might do it for Spider-Man 2. If I'm going to do it for anything, it'll be for that.
Well, what's fortunate is my brother and I have got our Xboxes set up so that his Xbox is registered as my home Xbox and vice versa. So
I've done that before.
If one of us buys a game, the other one can play it. So he bought Resident Evil 4 remake, and I bought Dead Space remake, and we're gonna go.
I used to do that, but I got unlinked it a while ago, and now I've got Game Pass. I just haven't really thought about doing it again, but it is a sneaky way of getting some extra games. But now we've got all.
I have to ask this before we finish. Have you played Starfield?
Yes. No, I've not. I went to go play it because I've not got an Xbox Series X. I've got an Xbox One S, like the little white one. I've got an Xbox One and One S, and you can go onto it on there. And I went to go play it, and it just said that you're in a queue and you can start playing. And it was on there for about 15-20 minutes, and I never actually got to the game. So it looks like you can play it on Xbox One, but I was not fortunate enough to get a go because I think it was just too busy at the time. So maybe if I try again now, it might work. But I think when it's on launch, there's too many people trying to play it. There's that beta streaming version. So perhaps a much better experience playing it on Xbox One X, I guess. Yeah. But that's the only console I've not really delved into because I went PS5 in the end. I was on the fence and eventually decided to go for PS5 because I wanted to eventually upgrade to VR2. And I think Spider-Man 2 and stuff pulled me in.
I'd love a PS5. I mean, that's the one thing that I would say PlayStation definitely have over Xbox is their exclusives are top tier. Absolutely top tier. It's just that they don't do everything else that I love about Xbox, like the extensive backwards compatibility or things like Game Pass. So Starfield is pretty good. It's thank you very much. I appreciate that. I always get really nervous doing these things. This isn't the first time I've done a podcast, but every time I do it, I get very, very nervous. First podcast I did was for a podcast called Pod of the Damned, and I talked about what's it called? Midsummer. It was
love Midsummer.
It was filmed.
I hate Midsummer, but I also love Midsummer.
It's as far as I'm concerned, it's up there for me with the likes of things like The Exorcist and Candyman. In terms of I say Candyman. Candyman is a personal favourite of mine. I know it's not necessarily
same actually. I don't know, man. I'm with you with Candyman. Candyman was a film I loved growing up. It was quite dark. Yeah, it was really, really good one actually. Candyman. I know you mentioned Exorcist. Ollie, he couldn't be on tonight, but he's a big Exorcist fan. I think that's his favourite film. And he was he would have liked to have chatted all things Exorcist.
Well, that's funny, because I was saying as well, because I'm trying to get my wife to watch The Exorcist because I don't think thank you. I don't see it. I think the reason why The Exorcist for me is so good is because it isn't just horror. I know that sounds really, really pretentious, but I read the book this year for the first time, and the book reads like someone who writes literary fiction who's trying horror for the first time. And I read it immediately after reading the Amityville Horror, which is trash of the highest order. And I don't mean that in a good way. Like, the Amityville Horror book is rubbish, absolutely rubbish. But The Exorcist is genuinely just a fine, fine novel. And it feels like that's gone into the film. The film, as they said back in the day, was what feels like a prestige film. You know, it feels like something that is a bit Oscar bait. It just happens to be quite a horrific horror film at the same time, which is why I'm not too keen on seeing the new one that's come out, because it looks crap.
It's difficult, isn't it, when you got like a franchise and there's just more and more stuff coming out for it. It's like we mentioned Jurassic Park earlier. One of my favorite films of all time is Jurassic Park, but Jurassic Park 2, Jurassic Park 3, like the newer ones with Chris Pratt, some of them are all right, but it's just, you can't be that first one. That first one was just hitting all the right points, all the right markers. Yeah. But I mean, we could go on a bit more and talk about Midsummer, because that film, Jesus, that was. I think it was one of these things where it's designed to make you feel uncomfortable. It just did too good a job. I felt so uncomfortable watching that film. I mean, I couldn't look away. But by the end of it, I was like, oh God, it just I can't. I don't think I'm ever going to feel safe if I ever end up in like a really peaceful, friendly town with like a bunch of Swedish people. I'm going to be terrified.
They're really nice.
And there's probably nothing. If you meet like really friendly people in real life now, be like, nah, you're a cult. What's going on? They're trying to kill me. It's it's a horrendous film, but excellently done. Yeah. Right. We've got. When you've got to go, you got to go. Right. And speaking of which, thank you very much for your time, Luke. Is there anything you want to quickly plug before we wrap up? Any socials or links or anything you want to shout out to?
I'm on pretty much every social. I'm veering more towards Threads now, only because Twitter/X or whatever the fuck it's called these days is just rubbish now. But I'm down on all of them as L.R.J. Allen Author, all one word. And I'm on Twitter, I'm on Instagram, I'm on Blue Sky, which is a new one that I've found out about, which is basically just Twitter.
Okay.
And I'm also on Threads. So if anyone wants to come and say hi, I generally try and engage as much as possible. I say as much as possible. I am an adult with a full-time job, and life just tends to get in the way. But I do try and engage as much as possible. So yeah, if you want to come find me.
And then you've got your new book out on Halloween. So what's the name of the new one?
It's just called On the Moor.
On the Moor. That's
On the Moor.
Yeah. Cool. So check out On the Moor this Halloween. Right. Thanks everyone for watching, and we'll see you next time.